Hi, my name is Kelly Thomas, and I am going to talk to y'all about the question and answer teaching method. Okay, so what is the question and answer teaching method? It's actually a teaching method that you use in your lessons probably a lot more than you initially realized. It's when the teacher is explaining a new concept, a new skill, and checks the students for comprehension. So why should you use it? There's a lot of pros and cons to using the Q&A teaching method. One of the pros is that it is a quick comprehension check. This isn't meant to be used as a full-on test of knowledge. It is just meant to be used on if the students are following along, paying attention, if they're listening. That's really more of the goal when you're using the Q&A teaching method. It creates active listeners. So it creates active listeners because the students know that you will be testing their comprehension on it. And it also engages students in the lesson. So it keeps them engaged, it keeps them active and listening. It's just a really useful tool to use when you're teaching a lesson. The final thing that it does is it expands think ratio. And what I mean when I say expand think ratio is that you create really active, engaged participation by essentially asking your students easier questions. When you do this, you really gain confidence, you gain participation, and as participation is still high, you then sort of tackle the more rigorous questions. There is a lot of pushback for the Q&A teaching method. One of the main things is that it creates a lot of confusion for the students. So when it creates this confusion by hearing incorrect information. So those two bullet points sort of go hand in hand. It does this when you are explaining a new skill and you're doing your quick comprehension check and you call on one student and they get it wrong. Then you call on the next student and they get it wrong. Or you call on a third student, because a lot of the times as teachers, we're just really searching for that student that was paying attention. We're searching for that student that's going to give us the right answer. And a lot of the times, though, we fail to realize that by asking numerous students like this, all the other classmates are just hearing incorrect answers. And when they're hearing incorrect answers, it really creates confusion, especially for kids that were already on the fence about this new skill. So it can discourage participation at times. So the way it discourages participation is that students don't want to raise their hand because they're really nervous they're going to get the answer wrong. And when they get the answer wrong, as much as we hate that they feel this way, they get embarrassed by getting it wrong in front of their peers. Nobody wants to get a question wrong, especially in front of all of their good friends. Students get confused, so they're not going to participate. That can come from the incorrect information that was being said in the previous bullet point. Or students are terrified of cold calls. Cold calls are when a teacher will randomly call you, they'll draw a popsicle stick for your name, but you're randomly chosen to answer the question. And this just really heightens a lot of anxiety in students and really discourages participation because they already feel defeated or on edge. So when should you use the Q&A teaching method? So the Q&A teaching method is used best if it's used consistently in the classroom. So when students know that you're going to turn around and check comprehension, when they know that you're seeking active participation or expecting active participation, they're more likely to fall into that routine. So that really helps when students know the expectations and what you're expecting of them. So how can you use the Q&A teaching method to the best of its ability? So the main thing when using this, which really decreases the chances of confusion, is when you start with open-ended questions. When you start with open-ended questions, it sort of creates this mentality that it's your opinion. What is your opinion, and what do you think is going to happen? The open-ended questions are sort of meant as like there's not a right answer and there's not a wrong answer. We just want to create discussion over a certain topic. Or you can hand out questions in advance. I know a lot of teachers are handing out questions in advance to decrease any chances of anxiety for their kids. When you hand out questions in advance, the students sort of know the high points. They know what to be extra cautious about when you're up there. They know what to, it really resonates with them. So a lot of people hand out questions before just to give the students a heads up in what to expect when it comes to questions and answers. Okay, so this is my model of the Q&A teaching method. This model was built on a lesson for Charlotte's Web, and this is meant as a open-ended prediction question. It sort of is asking what the kids think is going to happen. It's not a right answer. It's not a wrong answer. This is based off of the first chapter in Charlotte's Web. It's probably more beneficial if used further along into the story, but this is sort of the starting point for the question and answer teaching method.
Okay, good morning everybody. Today we are going to be starting our new unit on Charlotte's Web. So before we get started, I want everybody to grab their book and get seated. The first thing we are going to do before we start reading the book is actually just discussing what we think is going to happen in this book. So before we get started, I wanted to ask everybody, just by looking at the front cover of the book, what they think this book is going to be about. Okay, now that we've discussed what we think this book is going to be about, we're going to open up the book and look at the table of contents. The first chapter is a chapter called Before Breakfast, and before we start reading it, I want you to predict what you think is going to happen. So who can raise their hand and tell me what they think is going to happen in this chapter called?
Okay, so this was sort of a quick view as to the type of questions that are the most beneficial. It's sort of showing us, what do we expect is going to happen. There's not a right or wrong answer, but it gets the students hopefully thinking about what to expect with this chapter. You can spin this more by, after reading the chapter, how were you right, how were you wrong. It's really easy to do the question and answer teaching method with literacy because it's really discussion based as to why they think the author did something specific in the book. And For this, there's really no right or wrong answers. It's purely for engagement in discussion, but we want to make sure that the students are thinking and they're thinking deeper into things. So these are the sources I used. I used 2 Edutopia articles, and then I'm also reading Teach Like a Champion. I really recommend it. It's been really helpful for me. So thank you.